Hello and welcome to another episode of Alan Writes. This will be the second episode I'll be recording in a day, which makes it unusual for me, but the idea that I'm pursuing here is, well, it's refusing to let lie till tomorrow. Specifically, we're writing Winter on Hoth, or I think I came up with a better title because this isn't going to be a romance. This will not be a romance. Well, this is sci-fi, darn it, and we're going to put it on to, since it's fanfic, the Winter of Truth. I think it was. The Winter of Truth. Now, admittedly, there's a character named Winter in the Star Wars universe, so I may have to work her in. Oh boy, have I set a high bar for me. So, here we go. I've done some research. It's not going to be a romance. This is going to be a thriller, I believe. Our main character is an engineer who is thrust into a world of deceit. This is the Winter of Truth because she is very much about getting to the heart of the matter of things. And when she prods too deeply, well, in the Empire, that can be dangerous because the Empire is essentially built on deceit. But I did some research on the AT-AT walkers because this is fanfic, so I'm using AT-AT walkers. If I were to have to rebrand this somehow, I would have to change them. But the same idea goes for this: is that they use fear over function. It's look terrifying. It's a giant animal lumbering forward like a juggernaut, though not like a juggernaut tank, because those exist in the Star Wars universe. That's one of the advantages of doing something in somebody else's universe, is a lot of the things are already laid down. And while you can accidentally stumble across things that they didn't intend or have missed or other things like that, there are additional things that you don't have to come up with. So they're often a good starting place for stories. Though, if you want to truly make them your own, they cannot be the end. But anyway, let's get to it. She had just talked to her boss, and he had revealed that several AT-ATs had been lost on Hoth, despite the overwhelming victory. And there was harpoons and tow cables involved. Benara did what she did best. Second best. Researched engineering models. Researched engineering models. Specifically, harpoons and tow cables that might have brought down an AT-AT walker. Down one of her AT-AT walkers. Because she looks at them as hers. She's done enough work on them that she takes pride in it and has some ownership involved. If not exactly a plank like you would find in a ship, then she's at least got a hull fragment, an actuator, something like that. Oh, she doesn't work on legs. It's going to be armor of some sort. She's got a millimeter or two of the armor invested, so to speak. That's what she figures is hers. All right, so there were plenty in the galaxy. See, but few had the strength of Cable. Had what would be needed. Sufficient. What would it be? Sufficient docking strength, or sufficient penetration? Let's say she gets something wrong here. Penetration of the armor. Sufficient penetration of the armor. Adequate cable strength and length. And what else would they need? And lastly, it would all have to fit on some kind of speeder. Trouble was, the variables were too variable for that last part of things. If there were thousands and thousands of kinds of harpoons, there were 100. I would say 2 logarithmics here because she's an engineer. There were 100 times more types of speeders. That wasn't even counting handmade vehicles of unknown designs. 2 logarithmics. Logarithmics sounds like a logarithms. Logarithmics sounds like a some sort of an exercise routine. 2 logarithms worth of types might well as jump to 3 if you included that. She had to know more, and to that end, and reviewed some of the combat footage of various events of rebel forces across the galaxy. But every time she spotted a speeder, it was too small to house the kind of harpoon needed to penetrate the leg armor. The leg armor and she knew because she had those figures. The legs were always the weakest point in the design. That's just from an engineering standpoint. At some point you can't armor everything. They found that out with tanks, for example. You can't armor the treads. You can try to shield them, but you can't exactly armor them. Not like you'd like. And the rear engine compartment, you can't armor that too, because at some point the amount of armor you want to add is not going to make enough of a difference in stopping shell projectiles or just disrupting the engine in general with the impact. So you might as well go short on those. There's also the, like I said, there's a weight factor. Eventually you get an overburdened tank. It was the Mouse 2 or something like that, King Tiger, where the tank is essentially, it might as well be a fixed position. It's going to move so slow and be so vulnerable to things like air attack, for example. Which, of course, does exist in Star Wars, though they didn't have we'll get into that, where they didn't have fighter craft or TIE fighters on Hoth, for good reason, because it would have taken them too long to get there, and speed was important. They wanted to get the rebels before they escaped, and if you're going to have to drop a TIE fighter down, you're going to have to push it through the force shield. That's going to cause damage. You're going to have to recalibrate, and it's by the time you get all that done, no, that's not going to work. That's why they use the walkers. Anyway, she's going to find all that out. She doesn't know anything about the battle. They were 4 of them. They had to move. No, look at it. There we go. They had to. Not this again. Sometimes Google Documents has a fit. The weakest point. All right. What I need to do is I need to make sure everyone's going to be able to read this, don't I? Let's belatedly mark this up to 200%. For the weakest. Design. Battle of Scarif had revealed that much, though much the problem there owed itself to a lack of maintenance in an exceedingly wet environment. Fact that the rebels had somehow landed an entire army division, overwhelming garrison only after a hard fight. And then blasting their own forces with an immense bombardment when the Imperial Navy showed up. Was beside the point. Okay, so that's not how the Battle of Scarif went, but that is going to be the Imperial line of this, because Imperial propaganda works, and the Winter of Truth is much about truth and outing that. So we'll work to that theme. The group meeting, she had barely made any progress when the chime for a group meeting sounded out. She powered down the sound dampeners and opened up her workstation. The central area nearby was already filled with engineers. Her boss, nowhere to be seen, but for occasions like this, he did like to make an entrance. Alright, we're going to take a look at the Battle of Hoth now. The lights dimmed, the holographic display powered up. The Imperial crest rose up. An earthy, the green. Okay, it looks like a well, I remember it's a circle. That's good enough. Again, this is something I'll have to research. An earthy green circle shot through with connections that symbolized the unity of the core worlds. you couldn't see that without having pride in what they'd accomplished in just how long? 10 years? In just a decade and change. And surplus. The image shifted to that of the cockpit of an AT-AT, a familiar sight for everyone on the project. They didn't just design these. They often ran simulations and even tactical experiments using what are they called? Simulators. There's her own work. Good times. Good times. It was impossible to pilot one without feeling a bit of awe at what they'd created. And she is a creator. She is very much. She likes seeing her designs put to life. She's having an impact on the world. Who doesn't like that, really? But she's a special. She's intelligent. She's well educated, and she's kind of driven. So it's all good. It's a good starting character. This is the place she's starting from, not where she's going to end up. She's not a particularly appealing character necessarily. We can at least see her point of view, that she wants excellence, that she wants to help people survive. That's why she works with armor. Feeling awe. Not a bit of awe. Feeling awe. All right. A deep voice, calm and commanding, rose up. Begin the assault. Said. The voice said. In imperial tones. I don't know where General Veers grew up, but in confident tones. That's Veers, she heard someone say. Gotta be. He was in charge of Blizzard Force. That makes sense. Another replied, Shh. Shush. She told them both. Yes, it could be Veers. And yes, he'd commanded Blizzard Force. But if either of her co-workers ever met the man, she'd eat her belt. The image kept on. A distant, the world was an icy one. Snow glaciers alone. Not a single piece of earth to be seen. Not flat either, with juts of jagged. I can't call them ice. I already said it's an icy one. Of jagged, not icebergs. What are those called? Jagged thrusts of crust. With jagged thrust of crust coming up here and there. The AT-AT, of course, didn't care. It went forward. So did others, left and right. Half a dozen with scout transports at the edges. A standard formation, a standard attack formation. Nothing fancy, just brutal. Brutal force. Ha ha ha. The image skipped ahead. Distant structures came into sight. A hangar of some kind, and a the half and the half circles of a shield generator. Oh, I need to do the shield generator. Nothing fancy, just brutal force. Through the haze of a planetary shield, of a massive force shield. The AT-ATs slowed to push their way through, and her breath caught in her throat. There was going to be no air support. There's going to be no air support. A TIE fighter would be shredded if it tried to cross, and the Navy apparently couldn't penetrate it by armament. This was why the AT-ATs were going forward, charging toward the half circles, the distant. It was of a shield generator. All they had to do was drop that. And an aerial reinforcement. Reinforcement would swoop in. The battle unfolded as she the enemy had entrenched, though. Entrenched? It's very entrenching of us. The enemy had entrenched, though, with artillery and infantry. Nothing very heavy though. Nothing very heavy though. And the area wasn't big enough for there wasn't nothing very large though, and certainly not big enough to hold any. No, nothing very large though, and therefore nothing to worry about. Then the forward display. A reveal forward scan caught sight of the enemy speeders. They were little things. Two men. They were simple things. They were little things of a simple design. Pilot and gunner. Pilot and gunner. A lot of speed and not much armor. Not that you could armor. Could armor a speeder very much. But they didn't seem to have enough. But they didn't seem to have enough. Seem to be able to hold the harpoons she'd considered knew were coming. Then she the battle began. The AT-ATs were inexorable. But then one stumbled and fell. The enemy did have harpoons. A flash of the side screen revealed how it went down, but only for a moment. But only for a moment. Why did this happen again? Why? I don't want a hanger. Don't give me a hanger on this. Columns, align and indent. My brain, paragraph styles. Align and indent, indentation options. I want none. Alright. I will figure it out, but I hate this. A flash of the side screen reveal how it went down, but only for a moment. But only for a moment. She pushed forward to try and get a second look, but none came. At last, the targeting computer came down, aligned on the shield generator. Sparing a moment to deal with a wayward speeder with the undercannons before firing two heavy blasts that shattered the generator to bits. The shield came down. The fleet was everywhere. The lights came up around the room, and everyone whooped with joy. What did I call him? Telak. Telak was there, waiting, drinking in the adulation of victory, as if it were his own. He caught her eye, and mouthed the words, "Later," to her. For now, all she could do was wait until they got back to work. An AT-AT had gone down. She wasn't pleased. Okay. Because she hasn't figured out that it's a magnetic. Then she figured it out. The image of the last speeder as it was blown to pieces roiled through her mind. It did have a harpoon. A magnetic one. Like one. Of course. A simple solution to a very complex problem. And she felt she knew an equally simple solution to solving that. She's going to basically suggest that they degauss the legs or countercharge using the auxiliary generator before battle, before the magnetics can reassert. Because you can magnetize anything, as it turns out. You can, with enough effort, magnetize things like wood. At least I believe so. It just takes time and effort. Metals just happen to do it very quickly, and somewhat naturally they hold it. Counter. What about reinsert? A simple counter to the rebel strategy. May never need it, but so what? This is what will get her noticed and give her later access to Hoth. Because she, like I said, things are going to be hidden from her as to what took out the AT-ATs, especially one AT-AT that had basically a belly hatch blown and a grenade shoved in, which, if you remember from the movie, is the work of Luke Skywalker. Because it involved Luke Skywalker, that's going to be hidden from the general public, and she's not going to have access to that. She's going to want access to it. How can she, design the hatches to prevent that? She's going to be turned down for that, but she's still going to want to go to Hoth to see for herself for a battle assessment of how to improve the AT-ATs for a later time, and so she's going to get the green light to go to Hoth, and she's going to do her own side investigation. She's going to stumble upon the fact that Luke Skywalker's there, and and wander into the tumble of the thriller, the heart of the matter that's there, because there's going to be not an imperial inquisitor, but kind of a sub prelate thing, somebody who's reports, if not directly to the emperor, then at least to somebody who does report directly to the emperor, somebody important there that she's going to cross paths with and have an issue with, and I don't know where that issue is going to take us. But we'll find out, because that's the joy of writing. And sooner or later, we're going to figure this all out, and it's going to be interesting. It always is. But the first draft is invariably chaos, and the second draft will clear up ever so many things, and we'll go from there. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Alan Writes. It's number 2 in the Winter of Truth. I'm going to change that instead of Winter on Hoth. And I hope you've enjoyed this. If so, thank you, and have a good day. Thanks.